Hi, welcome to Local Issues. This is your host, Irving Steele, and we're so lucky today that we have a longtime leader and resident in the community who has done a lot for journalism, media, and a lot of other community involvement. Today we have Lee Howard. So welcome, Lee. How are you?
Thanks, Irving. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's great. We were just talking that you had kind of an interesting start into journalism. Do you mind sharing a little bit how you started your career in journalism?
Well, I really didn't even work in my high school newspaper, but my junior year of college, I decided to major in journalism, and I got involved in the newspaper at Washington and Lee University.
That's where you were doing undergrad?
That's where my undergrad was, and I became managing editor of the Ring Tum Phi, which was the name of the paper, and had a great time doing that. And I found actually, because I had such an interest in newspapers, that it actually helped my grades in other classes because I kind of found myself a little bit. And I did an internship at the Danville Register in Danville, Virginia, and that was where I also had my first job. So, and then I was up here in southeastern Connecticut on vacation because my grandmother had a beach house in Old Lyme. Saw that they were looking for an Old Lyme reporter, and I said, I think I could do that. And so I applied for that in 1979 when I was 23 years old. And
where was that at?
that was, well, the Day newspaper
Day.
Here in New London, yeah, of course.
Okay,
Yeah.
So the nice local newspaper. So I think that's inspiring that you were in college, you were trying different things out, and you kind of found, hey, maybe journalism and writing, that kind of general area might be a niche for you in your career.
Right. Yeah, I was very interested in what was going on at the time. It was sort of the Watergate era at that point. And a good friend of mine, Jim Barnes, and I, who were roommates for a while in college, became known as the Woodward and Bernstein of Washington and Lee, because we actually published an article, for instance, on the investments that Washington and Lee had in different businesses that were doing business in South Africa. And we wrote the article just before Arthur Ashe came to give a lecture at Washington and Lee, and he actually held up the paper during his lecture and said, I see you guys are onto this as well. So that was a pretty cool moment.
That's incredible, yeah. And do you think that's part of your interest in journalism, was kind of discovering and uncovering some of these facts and stories?
Yeah, I mean, I'd always known for years and years that, things were going on in the world that I didn't approve of and that I thought were corrupt and wrong. And I guess, as a young person, you think you're going to be able to correct all or most of the wrongs in your career. Maybe I've had a little bit of an impact, but it's a hard slog out there, as you may know. So I do, I've identified some areas that I thought were particularly troublesome, related to issues that were going on in the area, and I've brought a few of those to light and won a few awards in my time for investigative reporting. So that was a challenge, but also really valuable experience.
That's great. I mean, it's one of those things that you always believe that words truly have power, and just as you're saying, you're uncovering these things about South Africa and these other things, and one thing I find interesting is even if it's a global context, it still has a local connection or a local issue that has relevance.
Yeah, I think all issues that are national or international have some local component to it. We're always looking for the local angle at the day for whatever's going on. One of my biggest stories of my career was the H-1B visa story involving Pfizer Incorporated, which has a huge presence in southeastern Connecticut. And I ended up dredging up the fact they were basically laying off about 800 local employees to outsource most of their IT department to foreign actors who were doing a lot of the IT work. And of course, H-1B visas were originally intended, to bring in people with specialized skills that you couldn't get anywhere else. They were supposed to be very high-level skills, and they were supposed to get high pay. But over the years, the H-1B visa laws were watered down, so basically people with generic skills could get paid just, half of what the Americans were getting paid and save corporations billions of dollars. And, so I found that out on the local level, and then I reached out to some national people who were involved in the anti-H-1B visa movement. And
was it a local source that kind of tipped you off onto that? How
yeah.
does something like that work? You know, it sounds like a huge issue, huge
yeah,
story.
I mean, you know, normally I try to keep all my sources on the record, but for this particular story, I had 3 main sources, all of whom had to go off the record because they were employed at Pfizer. I think all 3 of them reached out to me individually, and I sort of put together the story based on their information, which included documents. I made them give me some documents, so I was absolutely, you know, 100% sure that this was a real thing. And it later was turned into a book by a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter who used part of my reporting for almost a full chapter in his book, Who Stole the American Dream.
Who Stole the American Dream?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
I guess congratulations on all that reporting, but
Thank
the
you.
whole, I guess, thought and what they were doing just sounds terrible to the American dream.
Yeah, and it's an interesting issue because you know, it's something that's not really a black and white issue as far as is it a conservative issue, is it a liberal issue? I strangely found that a lot of conservative groups reached out to me and thought I was something of a hero for doing this story, and I'm going like, why wouldn't anybody want to do this story? I mean, this is American people losing jobs based on a law that was kind of written unfavorably to American citizens, and I wouldn't think that would be a conservative or liberal thing. I think it's just an
American
an
thing,
American thing. Yeah.
You would think, right?
You would
Especially nowadays, that's maybe what we need more than anything is, hey, it's not a right thing or a left thing, it's an American thing.
Right. Yeah.
And so there's a lot of correlation to today, and I imagine on that story we're able to influence different leaders, elected people, policy at all? Was there any connection to that?
Yeah, I ended up winning a national award from a technology group that was interested in it. And, you know, there were some investigations and this and that, but, you know, in the end, not a whole lot changed, to tell you the truth. But there's always hope that somewhere down the way. But I do think that, you know, this is the kind of issue that someone like Donald Trump actually won points on because he at least came out, you know, in favor of the American worker, which I think is something that is often lost in a lot of the debates today on, you know, what the best policy is or whatever. I think a lot of times we lose the fact that, you know, American workers are getting the short end of the stick on a lot of these kinds of corporation moves to save money.
And especially something that sounds somewhat IT or technology related, potentially the story won't die, that it's still there. Maybe Dell or one of these technology companies find out about it and it becomes an issue again. Right.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is my story still crops up in academic papers. You know, I kind of keep track of the tentacles of the story, and it's still out there influencing the way people are talking about this issue. And, you know, I have no doubt that, you know, 15 to 20 years down the road, there'll be some changes as a result. Hopefully, you know, we'll come to a bit of a consensus. But until you talk things out, you know, it's hard to come to a consensus. And even most of the people that push this legislation, you know, would tell me on the record that they were in favor of, you know, amending the legislation to improve it, but it never actually happened because the corporate interests, I think, were too strong.
When push comes to shove, it's a little bit harder. But to your point around the whole American worker and providing opportunities for them, I don't know what's actually going to happen, but this, $1 or $2 trillion bill that was just passed, it feels like hopefully some of that will be investments into the American worker, some of these people who have lost jobs or factories have left. And I think you're exactly right. We need to fight for that American worker and provide opportunities and jobs for them.
Right. I mean, I'm here to report. I'm not here to be an editorialist on this, but you know, where I see there's problems with the way legislation is written or there's corruption involved. I mean, one of the reasons why I won the award for this story was I looked into political campaign donations, specifically from Pfizer to Chris Dodd, who was the senator at the time, and some of the other some of the other politicians and found that they were getting tens of thousands of dollars, and also from the India PAC, which was another group that was pushing the idea of allowing obviously their Indian workers to be employed by American corporations, which was good for Indians, but not so good for Americans.
Yeah, and the India PAC was based in D.C., based in America somewhere.
Right.
And that was completely legal that they were contributing to the campaigns.
It's completely legal, sure.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it should be legal or not is another question.
Yeah, that's another question. And what did you find out for where a lot of these donations were going? You said Senator Dodd received a bunch. Was it kind of split?
Yeah, it was Dodd and Lieberman, and actually Lieberman at the time was considered one of the really bad actors when it came to this particular issue, because he had actually written a white paper several years before, saying that H-1B was a terrible thing and that we needed to amend the laws, and he actually had specific ideas on how to amend the laws, and then he did a complete 360 at some point in his career to completely stand behind the laws as they were, that really kind of put the American worker on the short end of the stick.
Mm-hmm. And have there been other related stories connected to H-1B recently you've been looking at?
I'm working on the Times newspapers, which is the weekly newspapers that the Day runs. So it's been several years since I've really been involved. But there have been other instances in Connecticut and, of course, around the country where workers were laid off to bring in IT workers from out of country. And the way they do it is they create a layer, so another company that comes in, and so you're not hiring directly from within, you're hiring this third party, and that's the way they get around a lot of the H-1B laws, is they're not actually employing them directly. They're hiring through Infosys, or Tatyam is another one. So there are these sort of shell companies that hire pretty much only foreigners because they're the only ones that are willing to work for the wages that a lot of these corporations are paying.
That's incredible. I mean, I know personally I have someone in the New Hampshire area, and they're from India. They're over here on an H-1B, similar thing, kind of in the whole technology space. Mm-hmm. And then another one is we were building a company in Chicago for a couple of years, and we had somewhat of a difficult time finding the specific person for our technology roles. And so we used an H-1B for that for a couple Indians there too, mm-hmm. which it's a tough situation. We want to support the education for Americans, support more people going into programming and IT, but then what if the companies can't find that match? It's a really tough situation.
Yeah, it is. And, Senator Blumenthal has, been an advocate of H-1B based, again, on corporate need for more people with high-level skills. But even he has told me directly that he's got some reservations about, how far to go. I mean, if you have specialized needs and it's not being filled by an American, that's one thing. If you have specialized needs that could be filled by an American, even the way the laws are written now, you're supposed to go to that American first to give them the offer. And there's also other laws that have been written that indicate you should be paying the prevailing wage in a certain industry, in which case the American and Indian would be paid the same amount of money, which is, again, would be fine, but that's not the way it's actually going down in a lot of these companies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you think maybe one step back too, from a macro level, from the American government and America as a whole, if there's a lot of these needs in the marketplace and these jobs that exist that potentially hopefully pay decently well, how is our educational system setting up the next generation of people to match those needs in the community?
Yeah. Well, I think something like 50% of all advanced engineering degrees in America are now being filled by foreign students. So, wow. And the question is that simply because the Americans don't want to do the work that it takes to be an engineer, or is that some sort of weird phenomenon that has some other explanation? I don't know what the answer to that is, but I suspect it has a lot to do with, a lot of these foreign folks are willing to put more effort in because, they want to send money back home or whatever to help their situation at home. So, mm-hmm. and, America pays well, and they can live a fairly simple life and be able to help out their sisters or brothers or parents or whatever, that, you know, that's kind of what they're into. So
Yeah, it's a tough situation. I mean, maybe we can shift over to, you mentioned you won numerous awards over your journalism career. You won one for that story. Was there another one that kind of stood out for you?
Well, my most recent one was the top business award in Connecticut. And it was based on an investigation that I did based on reading through 2,500 pages of transcripts on the demise of the New London Security Federal Credit Union, which was a longtime credit union in New London, which strangely enough was at one point housed right above where my offices were in New London when I was running the Times papers about 19 years ago. And the federal government came and closed this company down kind of out of the blue, and the guy who was managing the assets of the company ended up jumping off the top of the tallest building in New London, committed suicide that same day. And so, and then a year later, it was revealed that he had been embezzling from New London Security Federal Credit Union. Something like $11 million had disappeared of local people's money. Nobody ever knew quite where it went. So I did an investigation which involved getting transcripts of some court transcripts of different court proceedings that were held to try to determine what had happened in this case. And unfortunately, I never was able to find out exactly what happened to the money, but it was an interesting ride to discover, some of the craziness that happened along the way, and how they discovered how the money became missing. And it was sort of a local mystery that 10 years later people are still talking about. And luckily nobody lost a whole lot of money because it was largely federally insured, but somewhere along the line, a lot of money disappeared, and nobody knows what Edwin Ratcliffe did with the money. And Edwin Ratcliffe's widow is still living in New London, and they have given a ton of money to Lawrence Memorial Hospital. So the question is, was any of that money from the money that was stolen? And that, again, that is not a question that has ever been answered.
And then it's still fine for her to donate all this money that their family has.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure they tracked it to her and probably didn't find anything. She has said she didn't know anything about it. Where it went, no one seems to be able to tell me, which seems weird. 10 years later, you'd think they would have figured out a way to track it down.
You would think, especially with a lot of the money being digital or having tracks of it there. And yeah, maybe it wasn't billions and trillions of dollars, but you think it's analogous to Bernie Madoff when he was doing the Ponzi schemes. And one thing my mom has always said to us is follow the money. Wherever it goes, there's something going on there.
That is the way journalism goes. You follow the money, and you're amazed at what you find out.
Oh wow, I can imagine that. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about, I guess, journalism as a whole right now. That there's a lot of talk that, hey, journalism, there's not going to be local papers and this and that. What's going on in journalism these days?
Boy. Well, I mean, it boils down to the bigger papers are probably doing as well as they've ever done, and the small to mid-sized papers are having a real struggle of it. The Day is a really unusual newspaper in that it's run essentially as a nonprofit. So they have been able to maintain quite a bit of their staffing levels. I mean, it's still probably 50% of what it was, 15 years ago. But relatively speaking, we're doing pretty well. So hopefully we can figure out a way to monetize. I mean, that's the biggest problem is, our advertising is way down, and when your advertising is way down, you can't pay the salaries. The question is, will we figure out a way to monetize? I have a feeling monetization is going to involve getting into other fields, whether it's managing digital ad campaigns. We actually have a digital ad component today, which is doing quite well. So I think that's helped us quite a bit. I've advocated for years that we get more into video advertising campaigns of one sort or another. I imagine that's in our future. I don't see it in our immediate future, but someday we'll probably figure that out. I mean, there's so many, YouTube advertising possibilities. There's so many mom and pops that could, advertise their restaurants and hotels and whatever else, online through video. I think that's someplace we could go.
And especially, I just was sent something funny. You mentioned videos. Just sent something yesterday that said, I think videos outperform just pictures on ads and on different platforms by about 8 times. It's unbelievable. So there could be good opportunity there.
Yeah, I mean, I've done some videography at the day, and it is a whole different thing. And you think of video as a visual medium, but actually I find that when I edit my visuals, it's really the audio that takes precedence. And it's so much more lively. There's so much more of a human component to it. To be able to read, someone's views on, some political thing is one thing, but to see them actually live on a video explain their views, gives you a whole different perspective. So.
I wonder if it's similar to the difference between, hey, send a text message or send an email, as opposed to, hey, let's sit down and have a coffee or have lunch and go over something together.
Yeah.
And then are there other areas that the day is branching off or potentially thinking about branching off?
Well, we're doing podcasting, which is going pretty well. I had a podcast for a while, but it got kind of scrambled by COVID. I was doing a history podcast, but we have several others that are doing pretty well. I know at one point we were doing events, but obviously COVID has kind of made that more difficult. But we were sponsoring like sports award events and that sort of thing, and making some money off of that. We have some magazines that do quite well. I think recently we used to have like, I don't know, 6 or 7 different magazines. We had like a family magazine, and we had a more high-level like home and garden type of magazine. And I think we decided to put it into one magazine that just gets published like once every 2 months instead of a bunch of different types of products. I mean, the Times papers do really well.
Can you explain what are the Times papers for people who don't know?
Yeah, the Times papers are weekly newspapers that are delivered either in the day newspaper itself or by snail mail. So we actually produce the papers about a week ahead of time, and they go out to every single person that has a mailing address in a given town or city.
Every single
person, not a post office address, but if you have like a mailing address. So if you're not getting the Times papers, and I have had several of my friends tell me, I'm not actually getting one, so just let me know, and email l.howard@theday.com, and I'll get you on the list. So we take a lot of stories from the day, and we have 9 different editions, and we cover into Norwich now. So we have Norwich, Montville, the Lyme Times, which covers Lyme, East Lyme, Old Lyme, and Salem. We have the Waterford Times, the New London Times, Groton Times, Mystic Times, Stonington Times that covers Stonington and North Stonington, and then we have the Thames River Times, which covers Ledyard and Preston.
That's a lot of times.
A lot of territory. I know, I like to tell people we have a circulation of about 105,000.
Yeah.
So we might collectively be the biggest newspaper in the state, because I'm not even sure the Hartford Courant has a circulation over 100,000 at this point.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And then the other side of it too is that people don't need to subscribe, right? That they're just mailed to their mailbox or whatever address they have.
Yeah, it's what's called a TMC, total market coverage. So we guarantee our advertisers that we get in the mailboxes of pretty much everybody in town. So I call it the people's paper, because everybody gets it. We try to get as much news out there, but we also have fun features like Pet Pal, and we have a feature called Kindness in Real Life. We have a lot of great columnists that cover everything from local wildlife to history. We have a lot of history columnists that are doing a great job. And we added the Norwich Times recently, which actually has a circulation something around 26,000. And that was done during COVID. how many newspapers do you know that were added during COVID?
That's pretty
I have a
unique.
feeling there's probably only one.
Yeah,
and
the Norwich Times.
And the Norwich Times is it.
Yeah.
And we've had a good time with that. I've got actually a pretty good budget for freelance writers, and we're doing cover stories every week that's completely our own. We're not reprinting day stuff for the most part. It's stuff that we're producing. Again, a lot of local history stuff, a lot of stuff, local personalities. So we have a fun time with it. It's mostly positive news. People doing good things, people moving to better jobs or retiring or whatever it is, and a lot of good stuff about people, what people are doing in the community, nonprofit organizations, that sort of thing. So it's a very positive paper, and people like that. In fact, whenever I put anything that's even slightly negative, like the triple murder in Griswold the other day, people don't like that so much in their little hometown paper. So we try to reduce the negative stuff as much as possible, but we still try to cover the news as well. I can't ignore a triple murder. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's still news, but
Right.
especially in these days with COVID, everything else going on, I feel like people do really want that positivity. And then another thing too, Lee, is you had me over to your place with Libby, and you just seem like the connector in the community. You have all these diverse people, from historians writing about history, or pet pals writing about pets and these kind of things. And
Right.
like you said, it's kind of this fun group of people, hopefully spreading some positivity and hopefully kind of bringing the community together a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like, a lot of it is people are just tired of reading negative news in the paper and sort of screaming at their TV for all the craziness that's going on. I mean, we try to talk to reasonable people that are doing beautiful things in their community, trying to make a difference the best way they can, and there's no ideology behind that. I know people on both sides of the political spectrum that are very giving, caring people, and I think if we focused on that more than on, the 1% of where we kind of like go crazy on different issues, we'd all be a lot better off. I actually am teaching a course now at Mitchell College on conflict communication. So we often get into the issues and how you can talk to people and try to be reasonable with them and find out what their core values are, as opposed to assuming where people are coming from and that they're just crazy or dumb or whatever it is. There are too many labels that are put on people these days, and not enough real discussion.
And just kind of that interest, like what Stephen Covey always says, just seek first to understand. And if you give someone a voice and try and listen to them, you can really have some kind of mutual understanding, hopefully. And I love it that outside of all the stuff you're doing with the Times, you're also giving back and teaching at a college, helping to potentially inspire the next generation of journalists.
Yeah. Well, I think, especially while you're still in your career, it's, because a lot of people that decide to teach after they're done with their career, but I think when you're actually involved in a career and you're teaching, it gives you such a great perspective, and it gives them such a great perspective of, oh, you wrote the story last week. Oh, that's cool, How did you write that story? So, I can actually have, solid, concrete kinds of stories and things that I've accomplished to point to. And then, actually one time in my journalism class, I told them I was having a real struggle with the lead of a story, and I gave them 2 different leads that I was thinking about writing, and I said, which one of these leads do you like the best? And one of my students later on wrote me a note saying she liked lead number 2, and and then we had this little conversation. Yeah, I agree, and here's why. And so, it gets them thinking, and it gets them feeling like they're involved in a process, which I think most people just think stuff like newspapers come together magically, but it's really a process that most people don't realize.
Thanks, Lee, so much for joining us today.
All right, thank you.